Imagine a single drink of water changing two shattered lives forever. In the blistering late summer of 1877, on a forgotten stretch of the old Santa Fe Trail, 30-year-old widow Martha Caldwell holds on to an abandoned postal station in the harsh New Mexico desert, not for wealth or land, but because it's the last echo of her young husband, taken from her far too soon. One merciless afternoon, a weary Apache stranger emerges from the heat shimmer, lips cracked and dry, and speaks just one quiet word: water. What begins as a simple act of mercy spirals into a storm of hidden truths, burning threats, and unbreakable trust. Two lost souls daring to rebuild from ashes in a tale of reclaimed youth and unexpected home. Will that one drink save them? Or will ruthless forces bury them in the sand? This story has an ending that brings millions to tears. Stay with me to the final moment. You won't regret it. If you are listening from your kitchen, brewing coffee, on a long drive, or anywhere life feels a little dry, comment below and tell me where you are today. Subscribe for more heart-gripping tales, and share if you need a reminder that kindness can rewrite destinies. Let's step into the dust. The summer of 1877 hung over the New Mexico territory like a curse that refused to lift. Heat rose in shimmering waves from the cracked earth along the old Santa Fe Trail, a trail now abandoned after the railroad snaked its way north, leaving ghosts in its wake. Caldwell Postal Station stood alone in that emptiness, a weathered adobe building with a sagging roof and a corral that leaned like a drunk against the wind. Dust devils spun across the yard, kicking up sagebrush and memories no one wanted. Martha Caldwell, 30 years old, and widowed, far too young, kept the place alive through sheer stubbornness. She wasn't staying for the land. The land gave nothing but thorns and drought. She wasn't staying for money. The mail route had dried up with the trail. She stayed because this was the last place her husband had breathed, the last place their unfinished life still echoed in the creaking boards and the empty chair by the cold hearth. Every day was a quiet war. Dawn found her on the roof, hammering tin patches over holes the wind had torn. Midday meant hauling buckets from a well that gave water grudgingly, drop by bitter drop. Evenings, she stood on the porch, eyes fixed on the empty horizon, where the trail vanished into heat haze, feeling the desert grind away what was left of her youth. She moved like a woman carrying an invisible load, shoulders slightly rounded, hands calloused from rope and axe, auburn hair pulled back tight under a faded bonnet. The mirror in the cracked glass told her the truth. Fine lines at her eyes, mouth set hard. But she rarely looked. There was work to do, and work kept the grief from swallowing her whole. That merciless afternoon in late August, the sun beat down without pity. Martha was out by the barn, wrestling with a splintered corral door that refused to hang straight. Sweat soaked her calico dress, stinging her eyes as she strained against the stubborn wood. The air smelled of baked clay and horse sweat, long gone. Then she saw him. A figure appeared at the edge of the yard, rising out of the heat shimmer like a mirage made flesh. Tall, lean, walking with a steady gait that ate distance without hurry. No horse, no rifle slung across his back. Just a man in a faded wool cloak the color of dust, wide-brimmed hat pulled low, dark hair tied back with a leather thong. Apache. She knew it at a glance. The high cheekbones, the way he moved silently over the hard ground. Her hand drifted toward the Colt she kept tucked in her apron pocket, but something in his posture stopped her. He wasn't sneaking. He stopped a respectful distance away, 20 yards at least, and raised one hand, palm open. His lips were cracked, face sunburned beneath the bronze. When he spoke, the word came out rough, dry as the trail itself. Water. One word. No demand. No threat. Just a statement of need. Martha hesitated, heart beating hard. Common sense said turn him away. Lone woman, Apache stranger, stories enough to curdle blood. But she saw the exhaustion in the set of his shoulders, the way he swayed just slightly. She'd felt that kind of thirst herself, out here where water meant life. She went to the rain barrel by the porch, one of the last precious inches from a storm weeks past, dipped the gourd ladle, and walked it out to him. He took it with both hands, careful not to brush her fingers, and drank slowly, letting the water soak in rather than gulp. When he finished, he set the ladle down gently on the ground, nodded once, and turned to go. Martha surprised herself by speaking. "Barn's empty. You can bed down there tonight if you've a mind to. Storm's coming in a day or two. Wind'll cut like a knife out on the open." He paused, looked at the barn, then back at her. Dark eyes steady, unreadable. After a long moment, he dipped his chin. "Elias Gray Elk," he said, voice low, the name rolling out like stones in a dry creek bed. That was all. No thanks. No questions. He walked to the barn, dropped a worn canvas roll in the shadows, and by dusk, he was already at work, straightening fence posts with economical strength, clearing brush from the well mouth without being asked. Martha watched from the porch as the sun bled out across the sky. For the first time in years, the station didn't feel quite so empty. The wind still howled. The desert still waited to claim everything. But something had shifted, just a fraction, like the first faint rumble of thunder far off on the horizon. The days that followed carried a new rhythm to Caldwell Station, one Martha hadn't known she was missing until it settled in. Elias Gray Elk worked without fanfare. Before the sun cleared the mesas, he was already out, digging deeper into the well with a short-handled spade, lining the sides with stones he'd pried from the dry creek bed. Water began to rise, slow but steady. No more hauling buckets from the muddy bottom. He reset fence posts that had leaned for years, packing the holes tight with rock and tamped earth. The corral door that had defied Martha now hung true on leather hinges he'd cut himself. He spoke little. Meals were beans, cornbread, and strong coffee shared on the porch steps at dusk. When he did talk, it was about practical things. The way wind shifted before rain, signs of coyote in the wash, how mesquite burned hot and clean. Martha found herself listening more than speaking, the silence between them growing less heavy each night. For the first time since her husband's death, she slept without the shotgun across her lap. She no longer jolted awake at every creak of the adobe settling. Elias was there, bedroll in the barn, awake when the wind changed. One evening, after a day spent reinforcing the roof against coming storms, Martha brought out 2 tin mugs of coffee. Elias took his, nodded thanks, and sat on the lower step, back to her, eyes on the darkening trail. The sky bruised purple over the distant mountains. She tested his name. "Elias." He turned his head slightly. "You were a scout. For the army." He stared into his coffee for a long moment. "Was." The word carried weight. She waited. "I led bluecoats through canyons my people knew since before horses. Thought guiding them would keep villages safe. Thought words could stop bullets." His voice stayed even, but the muscle in his jaw tightened. "The army took my maps, ignored my warnings, my own people, called me a traitor. I walk between worlds now, belong to neither." Martha absorbed that, the bitterness behind the calm. She understood being caught between grieving a husband, yet resenting the choices that put him in the ground, holding this place, yet hating what it demanded. Trust is built in small measures. A shared glance when thunder rumbled far off. The way he'd pause work to hand her a canteen before she realized she was parched. Nights when she'd find the woodpile stacked higher than she'd left it. Then the riders came. 3 men on good horses, dusters flapping, surveying gear tied behind saddles. They reined up in the yard mid-morning, hats low against the glare. The leader was broad-shouldered, mustache waxed, a city suit under the trail dust, clearly the man in charge, flanked by two hard cases wearing tied-down holsters. Martha stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. Elias appeared from the barn shadow, silent, shovel still in hand. The leader tipped his hat with false courtesy. "Ma'am, name's Harlan with the Territorial Transport Authority. We're mapping a new freight road, a strategic route to link the railhead south." His eyes swept the station, lingering on the well. "Fine water source you've got. Critical for the line." Martha's stomach tightened. This station's private property. Mail route's dead, but the deed's mine. Harlan smiled without warmth. "Progress doesn't respect old deeds, ma'am. Company's prepared to compensate. Generous offer for such isolated land." He named a figure that wouldn't buy a city dress. Behind him, one gun hand shifted, thumbs hooked in belt, staring at Elias with open suspicion. Harlan followed her gaze. "And your help there, Apache, ain't he? Dangerous country for mixing kinds." Elias said nothing, but his grip on the shovel handle whitened. Martha straightened. "Offers noted. Answers no." Harlan's smile thinned. "Think carefully. Accidents happen out here. Wells poison. Barns burn. Be a shame if a widow lost her only water." The threat hung in the hot air like gun smoke. The riders turned their mounts, kicking up dust as they rode east, but not before the second man spat toward Elias's boots. That night, Martha barred the door early. Elias moved his bedroll to the porch. "They're not done," he said simply. She knew he was right. The desert had taught her that greed wore many faces, and this one carried measuring chains and veiled promises. For the first time in weeks, the shotgun felt necessary again. The fragile peace at Caldwell Station had cracked. Something darker was riding in from the horizon. The rider's dust had barely settled when the first warning came, not with words, but with fire. It was a moonless night 2 weeks later. Elias had grown cautious, sleeping lightly on the porch with his rifle close, but even warriors tire. That evening he'd worked late, shoring up the well curb, muscles aching from hauling stone. For once, he let his eyes close fully in the barn loft. Martha barred the door as usual, shotgun loaded on the table. But sleep took her too. The smell woke Elias first, sharp coal oil cutting through the cool night air. He rolled silently from his bedroll, knife in hand, and slipped to the barn door. 3 shadows moved in the yard, jugs sloshing as they splashed liquid along the barn walls. A match flared. Flame raced up dry timber like a starving thing. Elias burst out, a low growl in his throat. He hit the first man low, driving him into the dirt, knife at throat, just long enough to still the struggle. The second swung a burning torch. Elias ducked, felt heat singe his hair, then slammed a fist into the man's gut. The third bolted for his horse, yelling curses into the dark. But the fire had bitten. It climbed the walls, licking at the roof beams. Elias released the man under him and attacked the flames bare-handed, beating them with his blanket, stomping sparks, ignoring the sear on his palms. Martha ran out, bucket in hand, throwing what little water they dared spare. Together they fought it back, but not before the barn corner blackened and the hay inside smoked. The arsonists vanished into the night, leaving only hoofprints and the stink of kerosene. Dawn revealed the damage. Charred planks, blistered hands for Elias. He wrapped them in strips torn from an old shirt without complaint, and a message clear as branded cattle. Harlan's crowd wasn't bluffing. While clearing ash, Martha kicked something metal in the debris. A rusted strongbox wedged behind a loose beam in the barn wall. She'd never seen it before. Elias pried it open with his knife. Inside, a sealed mail pouch, leather cracked but intact, stamped with the old postal mark from 7 years back. The night her husband died, her breath caught. Everyone had said it was bandits on the trail, quick shots, stolen horses, body left for coyotes. But the pouch told it different. She carried it inside, hands shaking as she cut the ties. Papers spilled out, ledgers, maps, names. Land claims forged, bribes noted, signatures from territorial officials, including one linked to the new freight company. Her husband hadn't died in a random holdup. He'd hidden evidence of a land grab scheme and paid with his life. Martha sank to the floor, papers clutched tight. All these years, she'd blamed fate, bandits, the cruel desert. But it was men in suits, men like Harlan, who'd orchestrated it, stealing futures one deed at a time. Rage hit first, hot and blinding. She pounded the adobe wall until her knuckles bled. Then grief, deeper than any before, for the young wife she'd been. Dreams burned before they kindled. Elias found her there. He didn't speak platitudes. He read the papers over her shoulder, face hardening as he recognized a name from his scouting days. A captain who'd ordered village raids under cover of security. The same man now tied to Harlan's operation. "This isn't new evil," he said quietly. "Same machine. Different wheels." Martha looked up, eyes fierce through tears. "They killed him for this place, for the water." Elias nodded. "And they'll come again. Harder." That night, he moved his bedroll inside the station house, no argument accepted. The lines were drawn sharply now. Not just a widow's home against progress, but two people against a system that crushed whoever stood in its path. If you're feeling the weight of this story like I am, these moments when truth hits harder than any bullet, do me a real kindness and hit that subscribe button. These tales of quiet courage don't tell themselves, and your support keeps the fire burning for more. The next move belonged to the shadows gathering on the horizon. Rain clouds built for the first time in months, dark and heavy. Whatever came next would come in the wet and the thunder. The storm broke 3 nights later, the first real rain in months rolling in like artillery from the west. Thunder cracked over the mesas, lightning stitching white across black clouds. Rain hammered the adobe roof, turning the yard to slick mud that sucked at boots and hooves alike. Visibility dropped to arm's length. Every flash revealed ghostly shapes moving in the downpour. Harlan's men came with it. 6 shadows this time, slickers gleaming wet, faces hard under dripping hat brims. They hit fast and coordinated. No shouted warnings. 2 men sloshed kerosene along the station's back wall, while others pried boards near the strongbox cache. The rest was covered with drawn irons. Elias exploded from the doorway, rifle barking once, taking a shoulder, spinning the man into the mud. He clubbed the stock into another's face, bone crunching audibly over the rain. But the storm masked their numbers. A loop of rope snared his ankle from behind, yanking him off balance. He went down hard, rifle skidding away. Boots stomped in. Ribs cracked. Breath exploded from his lungs. He slashed with his knife, opening a thigh, but weight pinned his arm. Blood mixed with rain, warm on cold skin. Inside, Martha rammed shells into the shotgun, heart pounding like thunder. She heard the geldings' panicked screams from the corral. Her husband's old gray, the last living link to better days. Flames caught despite the deluge. Kerosene defied the rain, racing blue fire up the haystack and into the rebuilt barn. Heat rolled out in waves, drying mud to steam. Martha charged out, shotgun thundering skyward. Pellets shredded mesquite branches overhead. "Back off!" A gun hand wheeled, grinning through the wet. He fired low. A bullet plowed dirt near her feet. She pumped the action, but another tackled her from the side. The shotgun flew, landing barrel deep in mud. Strong arms pinned her against the porch post. Cold pistol muzzle jammed under her chin. "Stay put, woman." Across the yard, the barn roof glowed orange beneath the downpour. Beams groaned, sagged. The gelding reared wildly against the rails, mane singed, eyes rolling white with terror. Martha twisted, screaming its name. Elias surged up once more, knife flashing. Gutted one attacker's slicker, but a pistol butt smashed his temple. He dropped face first into the churned earth, unmoving. The strongbox ripped free from its hiding spot. Papers spilled, ledgers flapping like wounded birds before soaking into mud, ink bleeding away vital names and dates. Harlan rode into the lantern light spilled from the open door, horse slipping in the mire. He surveyed the scene, calm as a judge. Torch the house, gather what pages survive, end it clean. His men dragged cans forward, splashing the last kerosene across the adobe walls and porch. Matches scraped. Flames hissed to life, defying the rain through sheer volume of fuel. The barn collapsed inward, with a roar louder than thunder. Sparks showered outward, igniting brush piles. Fire crawled toward the station despite the storm's fury, wind shifting, pushing the blaze their way. Martha struggled against her captor, nails raking his wrist. The gelding broke through a weakened rail in blind panic, bolting straight into the melee. Hooves thrashed. A stray shot meant for Elias caught it high in the chest. It crashed down mere yards away, legs kicking mud, blood pumping dark into the puddles. Martha's scream cut through the storm. She watched life fade from those familiar eyes, the last piece of her husband gone forever. Elias lay still, blood pooling around his head. The pistol at her throat pressed harder. Everything crumbled, the evidence dissolving, the buildings burning, the man who'd stood with her broken in the dirt. Years of holding on, of daring to hope again, all turning to smoke and ash. The desert had waited patiently. Now it claimed its due. Harlan leaned from the saddle, voice cutting clear. "Light it up. Leave nothing." A torch arced toward the porch roof. Flame caught hungry on dry shingles beneath the overhang. In that moment, defeat tasted final. Bitter. Absolute. Irreversible. The night swallowed hope whole. The storm broke 3 nights later. The first real rain in months rolling in like artillery from the west. Thunder cracked over the mesas, lightning stitching white across black clouds. Rain hammered the adobe roof, turning the yard to slick mud that sucked at boots and hooves alike. Visibility dropped to arm's length. Every flash revealed ghostly shapes moving in the downpour, shadows closing in on the station like predators scenting blood. Harlan's men came with it. 6 riders turned foot soldiers in the deluge, slickers gleaming wet, faces hard under dripping hat brims. They hit fast and coordinated. No shouted warnings. Splitting to cover angles drilled from saloon talk and payroll promises. 2 men sloshed kerosene along the station's back wall and around the porch supports, while others pried boards near the strongbox cache Elias had reinforced with iron spikes. The rest covered the yard with drawn irons, muzzles tracking movement. Elias exploded from the doorway, rifle barking once, a bullet taking a man high in the shoulder, spinning him into the mud with a curse drowned by thunder. He swung the stock into another's jaw, bone crunching audibly over the rain's roar. But the storm masked their approach. A loop of rawhide rope snared his ankle from the blind side, yanking him off balance into the churn. He went down hard, rifle skidding across slick earth. Boots stomped in relentlessly. Ribs cracked under heavy heels. Breath exploded from his lungs in a gasp. He slashed upward with his knife, opening a deep gash across one attacker's thigh, blood spraying hot against cold rain. But weight pinned his knife arm. Fists hammered his face, splitting skin. Inside, Martha rammed shells into the double-barreled shotgun, heart pounding like the thunder overhead. She heard the gelding's panicked screams from the corral, her husband's old gray, the last living link to wagon days and shared dreams, now trapped in the chaos. Flames caught despite the downpour. Kerosene defied the rain, racing blue and hungry up the haystack and into the rebuilt barn timbers. Heat rolled out in visible waves, turning falling rain to steam that rose ghostly in lightning flashes. Martha charged out onto the porch, shotgun thundering skyward. The blast shredded mesquite branches overhead, pellets rattling like hail. "Back off this land!" A gun hand wheeled toward her, grinning savagely through the wet, teeth white in the firelight. He fired low. A bullet plowed dirt near her feet, kicking mud onto her hem. She pumped the action for another round, but a burly shape tackled her from the side. The shotgun flew from her grasp, landing barrel deep in the mire. Strong arms pinned her against the porch post, rope biting wrists. Cold pistol muzzle jammed under her chin, forcing her head back. "Stay put, widow. Watch it burn." Across the yard, the barn roof glowed orange beneath the relentless rain. Beams groaned under the heat, sagged dangerously. The gelding reared wildly against the rails, mane singed and smoking, eyes rolling white with raw terror. Martha twisted against her bonds, screaming the horse's name into the wind. Elias surged up once more through sheer will, knife flashing in a desperate arc, gutting one attacker's slicker, but a heavy pistol butt smashed across his temple. He dropped face first into the churned earth, unmoving amid the puddles turning red. The strongbox ripped free from its hiding spot with the screech of nails. Papers spilled out, ledgers flapping like wounded birds before soaking into mud, ink bleeding away vital names, dates, and forged signatures in dark streams. Harlan rode calmly into the lantern light spilling from the open door, horse slipping and recovering in the mire. He surveyed the wreckage with detached satisfaction. Torch the house proper, gather whatever pages survive the wet, end it clean, no loose ends. His men dragged the last cans forward, splashing kerosene across the adobe walls, door frame, and porch. Matches scraped alive. Flames hissed a defiant life, fed by sheer volume of fuel, crawling upward even as rain fought them. The barn collapsed inward with a roar louder than any thunder yet. Sparks showered outward in a deadly bloom, igniting scattered brush piles despite the storm. Fire crawled inexorably toward the station, wind shifting traitorously to push the blaze their direction. Martha struggled harder against her captor, nails raking his wrist until blood welled. The gelding, driven mad, broke through a weakened rail in blind panic, bolting straight into the melee. Hooves thrashed wildly. A stray shot meant for Elias caught it high in the chest. It crashed down mere yards away, legs kicking deep ruts in the mud, blood pumping dark and thick into the puddles. Martha's scream cut raw through the storm. She watched life fade from those familiar brown eyes, the last piece of her husband, gone forever in the filth. Elias lay still, blood pooling wide around his head. The pistol at her throat pressed harder, bruising skin. Everything crumbled in that instant, the evidence dissolving unreadably, the buildings feeding the flames, the man who'd stood unflinching with her broken in the dirt. Years of stubborn holding, of daring to let hope creep back, all turning to smoke, ash, and irreversible loss. The desert had waited patiently through drought and isolation. Now, cloaked in storm, it claimed its due without mercy. Harlan leaned down from the saddle, voice cutting clear above the crackle. "Light the roof. Leave nothing standing." A torch arced high toward the porch overhang. Flame caught hungry on dry shingles, sheltered from the rain's full force, spreading fast. In that frozen moment, defeat tasted final. Bitter, absolute, irreversible. The night swallowed hope whole, leaving only fire and ruin. But in the instant the torch left the thrower's hand, something inside Martha snapped, not into panic, but into cold, clear fury. She drove her heel hard into her captor's instep, bone crunched, his grip loosened just enough. She twisted free, dropping low as a bullet whined overhead. Mud sucked at her knees, but she lunged for the shotgun half buried nearby, fingers closing around the slick stock. Harlan barked orders, voice cracking for the first time. "Finish her!" She rolled in the mire, pumped the action once, chambering the second shell, and fired straight into the porch overhang above the torch thrower. The blast shredded shingles. Burning wood rained down, scattering the men as sparks exploded outward. Lightning forked overhead, freezing the chaos in stark white. Elias stirring in the mud, Harlan's horse rearing, gun hand scrambling. Martha rose to her knees, voice cutting through the storm like a whip. "Jenkins! Ruiz! Mrs. Alvarez!" She bellowed names of scattered neighbors, ranches miles off but close enough to night. "Fire at Caldwell Station! Riders are burning us out!" She fired the last shell skyward, muzzle flash a beacon against the black. The report rolled across the flats like cannon fire, unmistakable in thin desert air. Harlan cursed, wheeling his horse. "Shut her up!" But the call carried. Far off, answering lights flickered, lanterns swinging as riders spurred toward the glow. Neighbors answered fire calls, always. Elias pushed up on one arm, blood streaming from his scalp, eyes locking on Martha. He snatched his fallen knife and slashed her wrist ropes in one motion as he staggered past. Together they backed toward the door, her wielding the empty shotgun like a club, him with a knife ready. The attackers hesitated. Evidence half ruined, fire slowed by rain, distant hoofbeats growing louder. Harlan saw the shift. He snatched a sodden ledger page from the mud and stuffed it inside his slicker. "Pull back! We'll finish this legally!" His men broke, mounting slippery horses, kicking into darkness. One lagged, fumbling reload. Elias hurled his knife. It was buried in the man's shoulder. He screamed and fled. The yard emptied fast, leaving burning wreckage, the dead gelding steaming in rain, and two battered figures amid the ruin. Neighbors arrived in a rush, 6 men and 2 women on lathered horses, shotguns ready, lanterns cutting the storm. Jenkins took in charred barn, spilled kerosene cans, and boot tracks. "Arson plain," he growled. "Attempted murder, too." Mrs. Alvarez wrapped a blanket around Martha's shoulders, while her sons beat out flames with soaked sacks. They salvaged enough unburned pages, key signatures visible despite smeared ink. With the strongbox and kerosene evidence, it painted a clear picture for any honest lawman. Word spread by morning. The territorial marshal rode in by noon. Harlan and 3 hands were dragged from the town cells. Testimony and proof, too damning. The scheme unraveled, forged claims voided, officials implicated. Caldwell Station remained Martha's. Dawn broke clean, sky pale and vast. Smoke rose thin from blackened beams, but the adobe stood solid, walls scorched, yet unbreached. Martha stepped out with a coffee tin, wrists bandaged, face bruised, but eyes steady. She half expected emptiness. Elias gone with the threat ended. His paint horse stood saddled by corral ruins, bedroll tied. Her stomach dropped. She walked slowly, boots crunching gravel. Elias was at the post, cinching the final. He sensed her, turned, face swollen, cuts fresh, posture straight. She stopped paces away. "Threats handled. You've done more than owed." He studied her. "Road's always there." Martha nodded, throat tight. She wouldn't beg. Elias reached up, unhooked his faded hat, the one worn soft by trail, and hung it deliberately on the porch hook. The same hook was empty since her husband's coat. He met her eyes. But I've walked enough. Martha set the coffee on the rail and turned to the stove inside. The door stayed open to fresh air. Later, passers-by would see smoke damage, but also 2 figures rebuilding the fence from salvaged timber. Not a widow and a drifter, just a man and a woman, claiming the place as theirs. 1 drink of water had started it. The storm tested it. In the clear light after, they'd chosen home. The wind still blew hard most days, but it carried promise now. There you have it, the story of 1 drink of water that turned a forgotten station into a hard-won home, and 2 scarred souls into something unbreakable. What stayed with you most? Martha's raw courage in that storm, Elias choosing to hang his hat and stay, or the quiet truth that sometimes kindness in the desert changes everything? Drop a comment below. Tell me your thoughts, where you're listening from today. Maybe over morning coffee or a long drive. I read everyone. Thanks for riding this trail with me. If this one hit you in the chest, like it does me, hit like, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe so we meet again soon. Next time, another fire-lit tale waits. Until then, keep your eyes on the horizon. You never know what's walking toward you. See you on the dust trail.